So with my own family joining the church, when John Taylor first went over to the Isle of Man, I believe it was 1840 or 1841. And one of the first people he met was actually the cousin of my family members in Douglas. Douglas, if you get a chance to serve on the Isle of Man, it's the capital. And it's kind of the main port that you go into when you get to the island. When he got there, he met this, John Taylor met this cousin of my family. And, he was excited to meet this American minister who was going to preach to him. And, he came and taught my family, and little did he know that it had been my own ancestor, Charles Cowley. He had been, to several churches. He'd actually been excommunicated from some churches because, and according to his journal, it says he was seeking correct truth concerning the will of God, and they just weren't giving it to him. And so he had actually been part of the Wesleyan Methodist sect. He had been part of, I believe it was the Church of England sect. And his wife had had a dream several years before, and in her dream, an American minister had come and had taught them the gospel. And, when he came, he sang this song called Come to Supper. And, he came speaking the truth. And so when John Taylor went and taught them that very same evening, he started the meeting by singing this song, Come to Supper. And Anne had remembered it so well from her dream that she was actually able to sing it along with him, despite never hearing it before. And John Taylor taught them the gospel, and they refused to wait till morning to be baptized. They were baptized that very evening. I believe it was in October. And, several years later, and, many lives later, they ultimately emigrated back to the United States. And Charles Cowley was actually able to pay for a lot of the passage, from the Liverpool docks for a lot of those saints to come over. I believe that it was the Swanton that they crossed over on and ultimately landed in New Orleans. And so, definitely a history of miracles with my family. And it was amazing for me as a missionary to then, be called not only to the England Manchester mission, but early in my mission I was actually called as one of 2 missionaries serving on the Isle of Man. Almost this place that's, very, very unique in its own right. And so hopefully you get, if you're serving a mission in England Manchester, hopefully you get the chance to serve on the Isle of Man. It's really an incredible experience. And for me, being there, there wasn't a day that went by that I wasn't thinking about John Taylor, or thinking about Charles Cowley, or, a lot of the sacrifices that they had made. And it was amazing because one of the ladies that I taught who was baptized on the Isle of Man actually has a lot of Cowley ancestry. And so it was kind of neat to almost go back in a way and teach my own family and, for them to join the church. And, nearly most days of the week when I was speaking to people, they'd be like, Cowley, that's a Manx name, isn't it? And I was able to, be really quite proud of my heritage, coming from the Isle of Man.
There's a man by the name of William Billy Johnson, who is kind of the pioneer for Western Africa to bring the church there. And we got to meet him one time in the temple during our mission, so it was really cool to meet him and hear his story. But just briefly, if you want to get more history, there's a great movie called Pioneers of Africa, and it has a lot of this man's journey in all of Africa in general and the growth there. So, great movie if you ever have a chance to watch it. But what I can give you briefly is he, a very spiritual man looking for truth, had a dream one day about seeing a book with an angel on it. Turns out that he was praying one day, and underneath his bed was a book, lots of books, and one of them was that same Angel Moroni. And it was one of the versions of the Book of Mormon that had the blue cover with just the Angel Moroni. And so he opened it up, but the page was torn out that said, The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And so this is the book he saw in his dream, and so he knew it was what he was supposed to be doing. He just didn't know what church it belonged to. And so he read it, and he's like, this book is true. And he knew it was true, and he knew that God wanted him to start preaching it. Unfortunately, he just didn't know what church it belonged to, and so he actually started forming a group, and I hope I'm not making any of this up. This is what I remember, so if I'm wrong, sorry. It's faulty memory. But what I do remember is he started a group where he just started getting people together and started teaching them from the Book of Mormon. Long story short, I think they finally figured out that it was the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, And then they started sending over messages to the church headquarters saying, hey, bring over missionaries, give us more pamphlets, tell us what we need to do to get baptized and things like this. And it took a long time. They had to be patient. It took many years from the time that he first got that book to when missionaries were finally sent. But when they were finally sent, there was just an explosion of growth. I mean, thousands. When the first missionaries, there were a couple missionaries that went to Ghana in West Africa, and they baptized thousands of people who were ready and willing to follow Christ. And so that was really neat. And the church has just been growing ever since. What was interesting was there was what they call a freeze, where the LDS Church was not allowed to practice for a time. And so what was cool is Brother Johnson took it upon himself to say, hey, even though we can't formally come to a church, we need to be meeting at our homes. And so they kind of secretly gathered, and I can't remember if they partook of the sacrament or not, but they got together and almost like a home teaching type or a family home evening thing, got our group together, and they still worshiped God and taught each other from the pamphlets they were given from the church. And so even with that freeze, they were still faithful members. And then they finally, the country of Ghana took that away. And like I said, it's been growing ever since. And it's getting ready to explode. So as the theme is this year, hastening of the work, salvation, that's Africa is one place that's really, really happening. So it's an exciting time.
So this story is a combination of Czech history and church history. The family that I lived with while I was in one of the cities that I served in, they were one of the strongest families of the church during communism. It was incredibly difficult to keep a strong faith during communism because really any religion was forbidden. And so in order to keep their faith and to continue meeting as a church body, they would have secret sacrament meetings, and they would do it in the woods. They would do it up at camps out in nature. They would do it on the first level of one of their homes. And they realized, or one of the things that they did to spread the gospel in a way that wouldn't be noticed and shut down by the government, was through yoga. This family would hold yoga camps, and yoga was considered kind of a spiritual outlet for a lot of the people who couldn't grow their spirituality through religion or through a church. And so they would hold these yoga camps that taught such principles as not drinking, not smoking, being pure, all these gospel principles that they would weave into yoga teachings. And if students of these camps showed interest, then they would give them a Bible. And if they read the Bible, then they would give them a Book of Mormon. And they would teach the gospel to them as soon as they knew that they could be trusted and that they wouldn't rat out the church in that city. And these students who were baptized during that time, many of them in things anywhere from tubs in basements of homes to lakes in the forest at midnight, they would go back to their homes after they graduated from the university, and most of the little branches that are in the Czech Republic today, the branch presidents that started that branch were the students from that time. And it's an incredible impact that one family had on the success of the church today in the Czech Republic.
Basically, the mission was really revolutionized by a former BYU basketball star, Krešimir Ćosić. His jersey is actually still up in the Marriott Center. He came to BYU as a student. He wasn't a member, but he investigated the church, was really good friends with a member of the 12 Apostles. I can't remember who it was at the time. It might have even been President Benson, but I can't remember. And then he just basically brought what he learned from the church after he converted and brought it to Croatia to start out with, because he's Croatian. He was also the one who translated the Book of Mormon into Croatian, and that's what I used for the majority of the mission. We didn't get the Serbian copy of the Book of Mormon until I was about to leave in 2008. That's when we first got that copy, and it was a huge blessing to receive the Book of Mormon in their language. But the Croatian copy sufficed. It was good enough to use while we were missionaries. But Krešimir Ćosić probably did more for the saints in former Yugoslavia, in revolutionizing and really getting things started in that part of the country. Sadly, he died of cancer in the 90s. I think it was the late 90s, I believe, but he was one of the great working hands to get it going. And President Monson worked with Krešimir Ćosić and dedicated the land, all of former Yugoslavia, starting in Croatia, for missionary work. That's kind of where it blossomed, bloomed, and the power of the Spirit and of missionary work got started. But like I said, before that dedicatorial prayer by President Monson, it was just part of the Vienna, the Germany mission. When I was serving, there's one district in Slovenia, 2 in Croatia, and just 1 in Serbia. That's what I know for Slovenia and Croatia. But Serbia, definitely, we had 1 district, and there were 3 organized branches when I first started. And also 13 missionaries just in Serbia. The cities that were open in Serbia were Beograd, Novi Sad, and Sremska Mitrovica. And I started serving in Novi Sad, then went from Novi Sad to Sremska Mitrovica, then to Beograd. And from the beginning of my mission, having only 3 branches, by the end of the mission, we spread out to starting more groups. We didn't have enough people to organize more branches, but we were able to start some more groups. One in Pančevo, just outside of Belgrade, and then the other in Subotica, just on the northern tip of Serbia, where missionaries were able to go. They were able to start, organize, have senior couples to kind of be the leaders of those groups, or even of the branches, and get work starting to spread. And missionary work was spreading like crazy. Up until about 2008, December 2007 to February of 2008, it kind of started to crumble before our eyes. And that's a very, very significant experience. Because in December 2007, Kosovo that was the dedicated date for Kosovo to declare its independence away from Serbia. And it was also conveniently the time that the Book of Mormon was supposed to be the Book of Mormon was supposed to be in our hands, in Serbian, the Serbian copy of the Book of Mormon. But neither happened. And then we just thought, okay, everything's fine. We just go back to serving. And then mid-February of 2008, both happened. Kosovo declared its independence, and we received the Serbian translated copy of the Book of Mormon. At least they were in Slovenia. They were in the mission home. They weren't in our hands yet. We couldn't get them into Serbia because of all that was happening with Kosovo. Because, long story short, Kosovo wanted to declare its independence, but Serbia said, you're not going to do that. You're still part of Serbia. So if you even try that, we're going to come back. We're going to come at you full force and take you, take you back, essentially. And that was backed by Russia. But then America, U.S., we kind of stepped in, and they said, no, Serbia, Russia, leave them alone. Let Kosovo declare their independence away from you. If you don't, if you go in and invade Kosovo, then we will back Kosovo and attack you. Now that's kind of pretty general. That's all very, like I said, long story short. But Kosovo declared its independence. Serbia, as you can tell, as you could probably guess, was very, very, very mad, very upset with Americans. And since, truth be told, the church is looked at as an American church, and so our lives were kind of in danger because of that. So what happened was the area authorities and the mission president at the time decided that the best thing to do right now, just in case, nothing was happening to the church or anything just yet, but and nothing did happen, by the way, just to spoil the story. Nothing happened to the church. But as a precautionary measure, they took all the Serbian missionaries. They took us all out, which I unfortunately was not. I was not in Serbia at the time. I was on exchanges with the zone leader in Slovenia doing zone conference type meeting. We were doing a mission. I don't know what it's called. Basically, the meeting with the mission president of all the zone leaders throughout all of the mission. But when I got back, we got back from Slovenia to Croatia, to Zagreb. We stayed the night, and we had tickets for the train the following morning. And the mission president called us early that morning before we left. We start just basically telling us that we're not going back to Serbia. So I had all of my things there, and as you can imagine, hearing that news, we were heartbroken, absolutely heartbroken. And I thought for sure, no, this is just temporary. We're going to go back. Then all of our stuff came, all the missionaries, after a lot of different complications, communication, and train, bus, little complications. We eventually all got back into Serbia, or into Croatia, sorry. And that was kind of it. We got into Zagreb. We opened up a big box of Serbian copies of the Book of Mormon, because they got we took a few boxes from the mission home in Slovenia and brought them to Croatia because we were planning on taking them back. But as soon as we got the news that we weren't going back, we were kind of stuck in Croatia. And then the Serbian missionaries came over, and we basically told them, hey, we have a big present for you. And we started distributing the Serbian copies of the Book of Mormon. The Lord is filled with so much mystery, so much wisdom, that it doesn't matter what Satan tries to do, his work will be fulfilled. And it's kind of a testimony of the Book of Mormon in and of itself. Because even though we were using Croatian copies of the Book of Mormon, and Serbian and Croatian is very, very similar, with very few word differences, grammatical differences. You read one, you understand, or you know one, you basically know the other, is what it comes down to. But at the same time, it's not their language. So even though we had the Serbian copy, or the Croatian copy of the Book of Mormon, it's not their language. It's just like how Americans, if we receive a book that's in Australian or British English, we can understand it. We can understand it perfectly fine, but it's still not our language. It doesn't communicate to us as powerfully as it being in our language. So to receive a copy of a book so powerful, so true, so impactful into so many lives in your language means so much more. It's revolutionizing to the work. And because of all the events that happened with Kosovo declaring its independence, and with all the complications that went through with border control for Serbia and Croatia, getting those books into Serbia was nearly impossible. And it's you can kind of say that because of all these experiences, Satan knows that the Book of Mormon is true just by this experience. He knows. He knows of its power. He knows of its truthfulness, and he will do anything in his power, which compared to Heavenly Father's is very limited, to keep truth away from people he's trying to influence. But it happened. Little by little, members from Serbia were able to come from Serbia by car or by train and take boxes from the mission home in Slovenia, or even those boxes that we had in Croatia, to the different parts of Serbia, to Beograd, Pančevo, Subotica, Sremska Mitrovica, and Novi Sad, so that the members could enjoy the Book of Mormon in their language. So it doesn't matter what Satan has to say, the will and the work of the Lord will be accomplished in any way possible. So it didn't matter that we were taken out, the members still had the power of the Book of Mormon.
One important person to know about, what I wish I knew more about when I went to serve my mission, is a man named Matthew Cowley. He was an apostle. He served his mission in New Zealand. He was a mission president in New Zealand. When he gave his last testimony as an apostle, he did it in Maori. He was so crucial to the church in New Zealand. He translated the Book of Mormon into Maori. He did all these wonderful things. There's streets named after him in New Zealand. People changed their last names to be Cowleys because they admired him so much. He's such a big figure. He's a fantastic speaker. Some of his talks are online. There's one that he gives about miracles that I find particularly powerful. So if you can learn more about Matthew Cowley, he was such an expert in the Maori language, and he was so crucial. When they were translating the Book of Mormon, what they had him, and he was, I want to say he was in his early to late teenage years, so I think he was somewhere between 16 and 19, 20, somewhere in there when he served his mission. And he became such an expert in the language that when they translated the Book of Mormon into Maori, they got him and two chiefs together. And how they did is they each had an English Book of Mormon, and they went verse by verse, and they would write a translation, how they would translate it into Maori. And from there, they would each of them would put it in the middle, and they would discuss which one was chosen. And every single time for the entire Book of Mormon, Matthew Cowley's version was chosen. The man who had never spoken Maori before he started his mission was chosen. He was so powerful. I mean, he's just an incredible man. So you'll hear a lot about Matthew Cowley, so I recommend knowing more about him if you can. I think that pretty much covers it for New Zealand. generous, loving, kind, lots of food, lots of rugby. The church has been there for a while. There's a strong tradition of the church. The very first temple, one of the very first temples outside the United States, was the Hamilton Temple. There's amazing stories of David O. McKay speaking there, of things, just incredible sacred experiences. So there's a long and rich history of the church in New Zealand, and the more you know before you go, the better off you'll be.